Rahim was a man who had everything money could buy. His skyscraper office overlooked the city lights, and his mansion had rooms filled with treasures from around the world. Yet, despite all his wealth, there was a hollow space in his life, a quiet emptiness he could not fill. Business deals, luxury cars, and expensive dinners never made him feel complete. One rainy afternoon, Rahim decided he needed something different. Not another lavish party, not another expensive gift, but something simple, home-cooked food. Something that reminded him of life outside his glass towers. He called his assistant, asking for a cook, but not just any cook. He wanted someone who could bring warmth, care, and effort into each meal. Far away from Rahim's world, Amina, a young widow, worked hard to keep herself and her unborn child safe. Her husband had passed away 2 years ago, leaving her alone in a small apartment with peeling paint and a tiny stove. Every day, she woke up before dawn to clean houses and cook for families who could afford to pay her. Though life was harsh, Amina never lost her smile. She believed that one day, things would get better for her child and her. When Amina received Rahim's unusual offer, she was hesitant. A man of such wealth could be proud or demanding, and she did not want to make mistakes. But her rent was overdue, and she knew she had to take the opportunity. She packed her bag, wore her simple blue dress, and held her small notebook of recipes tightly. She had no idea that her life was about to change. Rahim watched from his grand kitchen as Amina entered for the first time. She looked small and delicate against the large space, yet there was a quiet confidence in her step. He expected a professional, polished chef, someone trained in fancy kitchens. Instead, he saw a woman who had faced hardships but carried herself with dignity. "Good afternoon," Amina said softly, bowing slightly. Her dark eyes scanned the kitchen tools, as if she were already imagining meals in her mind. Rahim nodded, his expression unreadable. "I expect simple meals. Healthy, fresh, and comforting. Nothing complicated." Amina smiled faintly. "I can do that. Simple food can be the best food." For the first few days, the air between them was tense. Rahim was used to commanding everyone around him, giving orders that were followed without question. Amina, however, worked quietly, with patience and care, paying attention to small details he had never noticed. The scent of fresh bread, the warmth of simmering stew, the perfect balance of spices, these were things that made Rahim pause, often without realizing it. One morning, as the rain tapped softly on the windows, Rahim sat at the table watching Amina prepare breakfast. She hummed quietly, and the sunlight caught her hair in golden strands. Rahim found himself asking a question he never thought he would. "How did you learn to cook like this?" he asked, genuinely curious. Amina looked at him and smiled. "My mother taught me. She said food can heal a tired heart. Even if life is hard, a good meal can make you feel safe for a little while." Rahim frowned, not because of doubt, but because her words touched a part of him he had long ignored. In all his wealth, he had never considered the power of such simple acts: food, care, attention. He had always believed money could solve anything. Yet here was a woman, poor by his standards, showing him something far richer. Days turned into a week, and Amina's meals became more than food to Rahim. They became a quiet comfort, a reminder that life could be gentle. One evening, he watched her stir a pot of soup, her small hand moving with skill and love. He noticed the faint line of worry on her forehead, the careful way she balanced flavors, and the way she never complained, even when he asked for small changes in the menu. "Why do you work so hard?" Rahim asked suddenly, his voice softer than usual. Amina paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "For my child," she said simply. "I want my baby to have a life better than mine. And I want to be proud of what I do, every day." Rahim was silent. Her words were simple, yet they carried a strength he had never experienced. He realized that wealth could buy comfort, power, and influence, but it could never teach patience, courage, or love. Those were lessons he was beginning to learn, quietly, in a kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of fresh bread. As the first part of their journey ended, Rahim knew one thing clearly: this woman, who had come to cook for him, had already begun to teach him something he had forgotten: grace. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something stirring in his heart, a hope that life could be more than contracts and numbers. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The days passed, and Rahim found himself thinking more about Amina than he expected. At first, he assumed it was curiosity. A woman from a completely different world, surviving struggles he could never imagine, and yet moving with quiet confidence. But slowly, he realized that it was more than curiosity, it was a strange comfort he hadn't felt in years. Amina, meanwhile, remained cautious. She noticed the way Rahim observed her, sometimes silently, sometimes with subtle questions about the food she prepared. He was polite, even considerate at times, but there was a tension in the air. He was a man used to control, and she was a woman used to surviving without asking for permission. One morning, Rahim decided to test her patience. He requested breakfast early, a complicated combination of dishes he had eaten in the finest restaurants. Amina raised her eyebrows slightly but nodded. "I will prepare it," she said calmly. As she moved through the kitchen, Rahim watched her every motion. He noticed how she measured ingredients with precision, how she kept the counter clean, how she never allowed frustration to show even when the order was demanding. It was in these small actions that Rahim began to see the strength behind her calm exterior. "You don't seem bothered by my demands," he remarked, leaning against the counter. Amina smiled faintly. "Life has taught me patience," she replied. "Sometimes, the hardest moments teach us to stay steady." Rahim felt a small sting of humility. In his world, patience was rare, often replaced by impatience and frustration. Here was a woman, facing hardship every day, showing him a kind of grace he had never encountered. Despite their differences, small moments of connection began to emerge. Amina learned to anticipate some of Rahim's preferences without being asked. Rahim, in turn, began to admire not only her cooking but her perspective on life. When he spoke of business, he often rambled about deals, profits, and plans. Amina would listen quietly, then gently suggest, "Sometimes, people are more important than numbers." At first, Rahim would brush it off. But slowly, the words stayed with him. He found himself thinking about them during meetings, during quiet evenings in his mansion, even when he was alone. Her perspective was different, but it made him question his own choices, his own priorities. One rainy afternoon, Rahim returned home earlier than usual. The streets were slick, the sky gray, and he was exhausted from a day of meetings. As he opened the door, he found Amina humming softly, stirring a pot of stew. The warmth of the kitchen, the smell of herbs and spices, felt like a gentle embrace. "Sit down," she said softly, placing a steaming bowl in front of him. "It's ready." Rahim hesitated for a moment, then sat. As he tasted the food, he realized something: it wasn't just nourishment. It was care. Each ingredient, each touch of flavor, spoke of someone who had invested more than time, someone who cared. "Why do you do this so well?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. Amina looked at him, her eyes calm but steady. "Because I have to do everything with love. Even if life is hard, even if I am tired, I want my child to see that life can still be beautiful." Rahim felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought about life like that. He had money, power, comfort, but no warmth, no simple acts that made a difference to someone's heart. And here was a woman, struggling in ways he could not imagine, teaching him lessons he had never learned in any school or boardroom. Over the next few days, a quiet rhythm settled between them. Amina cooked, Rahim observed, and small conversations filled the space between tasks. She spoke about small joys: sunlight through windows, fresh vegetables from the market, a song she liked to hum. Rahim listened, sometimes contributing his own thoughts, though carefully. It was not friendship yet, and certainly not love. There were moments of tension, Rahim's pride sometimes clashing with her independence, but also moments of understanding, when they recognized something familiar in each other. One evening, as the sun set in shades of orange and pink, Rahim watched Amina prepare dinner by the window. He realized that this woman, hired to cook for him, had begun to change the way he saw the world. It was not money or power that defined life, he now understood it was care, patience, and kindness. For the first time in years, Rahim did not feel the emptiness that always followed him. It was replaced by curiosity, respect, and a cautious hope. And as he watched Amina hum softly, stirring the pot with gentle hands, he understood something important: the journey of learning grace had already begun, and he was lucky enough to witness it. Little did he know, the challenges ahead would test both of them and teach them even more about trust, resilience, and the strength of the human heart. As the days turned into weeks, Rahim found himself looking forward to Amina's presence in the house. At first, he thought it was only because of her cooking, the way her meals filled the mansion with warmth and familiar scents. But slowly, he realized it was more than that. There was a calm in her voice, a quiet strength in her actions, and a simple honesty in her words that he had never experienced before. Amina noticed it too, though she did not say anything. She saw how he lingered in the kitchen sometimes, watching her prepare food as if the act itself was fascinating. She noticed the small smiles that would cross his face when he tasted something particularly good, and the way he would sometimes ask questions about her life, not out of curiosity alone, but because he genuinely wanted to know. One rainy morning, the power went out in the mansion. Rahim had always relied on staff and machines to take care of things, and he initially panicked when the lights and appliances stopped working. Amina, however, moved calmly through the darkened kitchen, lighting a small candle, and continued her preparations. "Don't worry," she said softly. "We can manage." Rahim watched her, amazed at her composure. She worked efficiently, chopping vegetables and stirring pots, while the soft glow of the candlelight created a peaceful atmosphere. For the first time, Rahim felt that life did not always have to be controlled or perfect to be beautiful. It could be simple, messy, and still full of warmth. "That's amazing," he said quietly. "You don't get scared?" Amina smiled faintly. "Life taught me to stay calm, even when things are difficult. Panic doesn't help anyone." Her words stayed with him longer than he expected. In his world, panic often turned into control, and control became isolation. Here was a woman, facing life with patience and courage, showing him a different way to handle challenges. Over time, they began to share small moments that were not about work or food. Amina would hum as she cooked, and Rahim would listen, sometimes joining in quietly. She told stories from her past, simple tales of her childhood, her late husband, and the dreams she held for her unborn child. Rahim, in turn, shared little pieces of his own life, not the business deals or wealth, but his loneliness, his struggles to find meaning beyond money, and the emptiness that had followed him for years. One afternoon, Rahim found her sitting by the window, sewing a small blanket for her child. The sunlight fell softly on her face, highlighting the gentle determination in her expression. He watched her quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest he did not fully understand. "Your child will be lucky," he said softly, not wanting to interrupt her focus. Amina looked up and smiled, a little surprised. "I hope so. I just want my child to feel loved, even when I am tired or worried." Rahim nodded, realizing how simple, yet powerful, her desire was. She wanted love, care, and safety, not wealth or status. And in that moment, he understood that he had spent his life seeking everything except what truly mattered. As the weeks continued, Rahim began to change in small ways. He started noticing the little things in life: the way sunlight touched the marble floors, the smell of fresh bread in the morning, the quiet rhythm of life when it slowed down. Amina had shown him patience, and slowly, he was learning gratitude. One evening, Rahim returned home to find Amina sitting at the table, her hands folded over a notebook. She had been writing recipes, little notes about meals she wanted to try, and the effort she put into everything made him admire her even more. "Do you enjoy cooking this much?" he asked curiously. Amina nodded. "Yes. It is not just food. It is love. It is care. Even if life is hard, I can give something good to someone through food." Rahim felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of his life that way. All his wealth, all his success, could never provide the same satisfaction as simple acts of kindness and care. He was beginning to realize that this woman, whom he had hired simply to cook, was teaching him lessons he could not have learned in any school or boardroom. That night, as he lay in his large, empty room, he thought about Amina and her quiet strength. He remembered her calm during the blackout, her laughter while sharing stories, her gentle way of handling every challenge. For the first time, he understood that human connection, compassion, and grace were far more valuable than any luxury he had ever owned. Little did he know, these small moments of connection were only the beginning. Their bond was slowly growing, like the gentle warmth of dawn after a long, cold night. And soon, the lessons of trust, understanding, and compassion would test both of them in ways neither could yet imagine. Life had started to feel different for Rahim. The mansion no longer seemed so empty, and the hours once filled with endless meetings now had pauses that he quietly treasured. He found himself looking forward to Amina's arrival each morning, the aroma of her cooking filling the rooms, and the gentle rhythm of her presence soothing his restless mind. But life was never simple, and soon, small shadows began to appear. One afternoon, Amina returned from the market looking tired, her steps slower than usual. Rahim noticed the faint worry in her eyes, the tension she tried to hide behind a polite smile. "You look tired," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Amina hesitated, then shook her head gently. "It's nothing. Just a lot to manage." Rahim frowned. He was not used to seeing anyone struggle, especially someone he had begun to care for. "You don't have to manage everything alone," he said firmly. "If you need help, tell me." Amina looked at him, a mix of surprise and hesitation in her gaze. She had been used to carrying burdens alone, never asking for help. Yet something in his tone felt different, not commanding, not pitying, but genuine concern. I have some matters to take care of," she admitted quietly. "Bills, the apartment, preparing for the baby, it is not easy." Rahim felt a pang in his chest. He had spent years protecting only himself, yet here was a woman facing real struggles every day with courage and grace. For the first time, he realized how unfair life could be, how strength was often hidden behind quiet smiles. Over the next few days, Rahim tried to help. He arranged for some of her bills to be paid discreetly and offered to help with her apartment. Amina was hesitant at first, not used to receiving such generosity without strings attached. But Rahim insisted, quietly, with patience. "You shouldn't carry everything alone," he said one evening, as they sat in the kitchen after dinner. "Even the strongest people need help sometimes." Amina looked down at her hands, then slowly nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. "It is rare to find someone who truly cares." The quiet honesty in her words touched Rahim deeply. He began to see her not just as a cook, but as a person with dreams, fears, and strength that could rival anyone he had ever known. She had survived loss, carried the responsibility of an unborn child, and still faced each day with courage. And yet, She had found a way to bring grace and warmth into his life, without asking for anything in return. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Amina shared a story from her past. Her voice was soft, but the memories were sharp. My husband, he believed in kindness. He always said, even in dark times, you must shine your light. When he passed, I thought I could never shine again. But then I realized, for my child, I must keep going. Rahim listened, silently absorbing her words. There was so much pain in them, yet so much hope as well. He realized that the strength she carried was not just for herself, it was for her child, for life, and for the goodness she refused to let go of. I admire you, Rahim said quietly. More than I can explain. You have a courage I could never imagine. Amina glanced at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and vulnerability. We all have courage, in different ways, she said softly. Some show it in battle or work, some in surviving each day. I just try to keep moving forward. Rahim felt a shift inside him. He had spent so much time building walls around his heart, hiding behind wealth and control, thinking that nothing could touch him. Yet this woman, with her gentle strength and quiet honesty, was slowly dismantling those walls. But life was still complicated. Amina's past responsibilities, her fears about the future, and the challenges of raising a child alone were realities that could not be ignored. Rahim realized that helping her was not just about money or comfort, it was about trust, patience, and understanding. He had to learn to support her without overstepping, to listen without judgment, and to care without expecting anything in return. That night, as Rahim stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, he thought about the lessons he had already learned from Amina. Patience, grace, strength, the courage to face life's challenges without losing hope. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he was beginning a journey he could never have imagined, a journey not just of helping someone else, but of discovering the deeper meaning of life itself. Amina, meanwhile, felt a quiet relief in his presence. For the first time in years, she did not have to carry everything alone. She realized that sometimes, trust was not a weakness, it was a strength that could bring warmth, care, and unexpected hope into a life that had known so much hardship. And so, their bond deepened, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through quiet understanding, shared struggles, and the gentle realization that even the heaviest burdens could be lighter when faced together. Little did they know, the real test of their trust and care was yet to come, a challenge that would show them both the true power of grace, compassion, and the human heart. The bond between Rahim and Amina had grown quietly, like a plant slowly reaching toward the sunlight. Each day, they discovered something new about each other. Rahim was learning patience, humility, and the importance of small acts of care. Amina, in turn, began to trust him in ways she had never allowed herself to trust anyone. One chilly morning, Rahim returned home earlier than usual. He found Amina in the kitchen, carefully preparing breakfast while humming a soft tune. The aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering stew filled the room, creating a warmth that seemed to soften the cold air outside. Good morning, Rahim said, smiling slightly. Good morning, Amina replied, her eyes bright despite the early hour. He watched her work, noticing the careful way she measured the ingredients, the gentle way she stirred the pots, and the quiet patience in every motion. It was in these small actions that he saw her strength, her dedication, and her grace. You always put so much care into everything, he said, his voice soft. Does it ever get tiring? Amina looked up, a faint smile on her lips. Sometimes. But care is not just about energy, it's about love. Even small acts can make a big difference. Rahim paused, reflecting on her words. He realized that he had spent so many years rushing through life, focused only on results and numbers, missing the beauty in the small things. Here was a woman who had so little in material wealth, yet she gave so much of herself every day. And in that giving, she had begun to teach him lessons he could not have learned anywhere else. Days later, an unexpected challenge arrived. Amina had received news that her apartment was damaged in a small fire while she was working at the mansion. Her first instinct was to hide her worry, but Rahim noticed the unease in her eyes when she arrived. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. Amina hesitated, then explained the situation. She was worried about her child and how she would manage everything alone. Rahim listened carefully, without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke calmly but firmly. "We will fix this. I will make sure your home is safe, and I will help you through this." Amina looked at him, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in her gaze. She had never expected someone to offer help without conditions, without judgment. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next few days, Rahim arranged for the repairs, hiring workers and overseeing the process, but he did it quietly, respecting her dignity. He did not try to take control, but simply offered support, learning the delicate balance of helping without overstepping. Through this challenge, their trust in each other deepened. Amina realized that Rahim's concern was sincere. He was not helping because of obligation or wealth, but because he genuinely cared for her well-being. Rahim, in turn, saw that trust and patience could build a connection far stronger than money or power ever could. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Amina shared a small story about her late husband. Her voice was soft, filled with memory and affection. "He used to say that kindness is a choice, even when life is unfair. I try to remember that, every day." Rahim felt a lump in his throat. He realized that her strength was not just in surviving hardship, but in the ability to choose kindness and grace, even when circumstances were difficult. He had spent so long believing that strength came from control and wealth, but here was a woman teaching him a different truth: real strength comes from love, patience, and understanding. "I want to learn from you," Rahim said quietly. "Not just about life, but about how to be better, how to care for others, and how to see the world differently." Amina looked at him, her eyes softening. "Then you already have the first lesson," she said. "You are willing to listen. That is more than most people do." The days continued to pass, and their connection deepened further. They shared small moments of joy, laughing over a burnt pancake, talking about childhood memories, or simply enjoying the quiet comfort of the kitchen together. Rahim began to notice the way her presence brought calm to the house, how her laughter lifted the heaviness of his mind, and how her simple acts of care made him feel something he had never felt before: hope. One evening, as the city lights shimmered through the large windows, Rahim realized that his life had changed in ways he had never expected. The emptiness that had haunted him for years was slowly being replaced by trust, understanding, and a quiet gratitude. He understood that Amina had not just cooked for him, she had opened his eyes to life, to compassion, and to the importance of human connection. And Amina, too, felt a sense of safety she had not known in years. She had allowed herself to trust someone again, to accept help, and to share her burdens. It was a small but meaningful step toward a future where she could face life with hope, courage, and the knowledge that she was not alone. In the quiet of that evening, as they worked side by side in the kitchen, both Rahim and Amina realized that their journey was only beginning. There were still challenges ahead, still lessons to learn, but the foundation of trust and understanding they were building would carry them through. And for the first time, both of them felt the gentle, unspoken promise of a brighter tomorrow. The days had grown warmer, and spring had begun to spread its gentle light across the city. Rahim had noticed changes in himself that surprised him. He was no longer impatient, no longer focused solely on work or wealth. His thoughts often wandered to Amina, to her strength, her patience, and the quiet ways she had transformed his life. One afternoon, Rahim received an urgent call from his office. A major business project had gone wrong, and it required his immediate attention. In the past, he would have dropped everything, rushing into action with tense energy and a sharp temper. But this time was different. He paused, looking toward the kitchen where Amina was preparing lunch. "Handle it without me," he instructed his assistant calmly. "I'll be back soon." Amina looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Is everything okay?" Rahim smiled faintly. "Yes, but I may need to step away for a little while. Go on with your work here. I trust you." Even in his wealth and power, he had learned to trust others, a lesson he had never embraced before. Watching Amina, he understood that strength and grace were not just qualities of resilience, but also of trust, patience, and care. As Rahim left for the office, he couldn't help but think of the lessons Amina had taught him. He remembered her calm during small crises, her careful attention to detail, and her gentle encouragement in moments of doubt. He realized that his life had been too full of noise and control, while hers, despite hardship, had been full of courage and wisdom. At the office, Rahim's team was frantic. The problem seemed complicated, overwhelming, and impossible to solve in time. But instead of panicking or issuing harsh commands, Rahim approached the situation differently. He listened, he encouraged, and he calmly led his team step by step. His voice was firm but kind, and his decisions were thoughtful. Hours later, the project was back on track. His team looked relieved and impressed. Rahim himself felt a quiet satisfaction, not from success or power, but from handling a challenge with patience and clarity, a skill he had learned from observing Amina. Returning home that evening, Rahim was greeted by the smell of dinner and the sight of Amina arranging the table. She looked up, smiling warmly. "Welcome home. You must be tired." "I am," he admitted, sitting down. "But I handled everything differently today." Calmly. "Thanks to you." Amina tilted her head, curious. "Me? How?" "You've taught me patience," he said simply. "You've shown me how to face challenges without panic, how to care for others, and how to trust. I didn't realize how much I needed those lessons until today." Amina felt a warmth spread through her chest. For years, she had worked quietly, surviving and caring for her unborn child, never imagining that her simple actions could inspire someone else, especially a man like Rahim. She realized that even small acts of grace could change hearts, and perhaps even lives. The following weeks brought more quiet moments of learning and understanding. Rahim began assisting Amina in small ways, not because he had to, but because he genuinely wanted to. He would help her with heavy groceries, ask about her comfort, and even sit with her as she rested, listening to her stories and dreams. One evening, Rahim noticed her looking at a small crib she had prepared for her child. The soft blanket, the little toys arranged neatly, and the gentle light of the room created a scene of simple love and hope. Rahim felt a deep admiration for her, not only for her courage but for her heart. "You've built something beautiful," he said quietly. "Not just this room, but the way you face life. It's inspiring." Amina looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just try to do what I can, every day. That's all anyone can do." Rahim realized that she had transformed him in ways he could never have imagined. He had once believed that money, power, and control defined life. But now he understood that true strength came from patience, care, and the willingness to face life with grace even when it was difficult. That night, as the city lights shimmered outside the large windows, Rahim sat quietly, thinking about the future. He knew that challenges would still come, that life would never be without struggle. But he also knew that with Amina's influence, he had learned how to face those challenges differently, with patience, understanding, and a heart open to compassion. Amina, meanwhile, felt a quiet peace. She realized that the man she had met weeks ago, the distant, wealthy, and sometimes impatient Rahim, had begun to change. She saw a warmth in him, a gentleness, and a willingness to grow. And in that moment, she understood that their journey was more than just about cooking or help. It was about trust, learning, and the quiet power of grace. Together, in small moments, they were discovering something extraordinary, that even the heaviest burdens could be lighter when faced with understanding, that kindness could transform hearts, and that love could grow quietly, without grand gestures, in the warmth of simple acts. And for the first time, both of them felt certain that their lives were moving towards something beautiful, something worth fighting for, protecting, and cherishing. Spring had fully arrived, bringing with it gentle sunlight, soft breezes, and the promise of new beginnings. Rahim had grown calmer, kinder, and more patient, and he owed much of this change to Amina. She had taught him lessons money could never buy: patience, trust, compassion, and grace. Their bond had deepened quietly, through shared moments, gentle conversations, and acts of care. One afternoon, Rahim found Amina in the garden, arranging flowers in small pots. The sunlight highlighted the softness of her hair and the gentle curve of her smile. He watched her for a moment, feeling a warmth in his heart he had never known. "You look happy," he said softly, stepping closer. Amina looked up, smiling. "I am. It's peaceful here. And I feel safe." Rahim's chest tightened. "You should always feel safe. I'll do everything I can to make sure of that." She nodded, touched by his words. There was honesty in his voice, a sincerity that went beyond anything she had expected from someone of his wealth and status. For the first time in years, she did not have to hide her trust or her heart. The following weeks brought even more closeness. Rahim helped Amina prepare for her child's arrival, arranging the nursery, gathering supplies, and listening to her plans and worries. He learned from her, not just about care, but about life itself, the simple, quiet ways that patience and love could transform everything. One evening, after dinner, they sat together in the living room. Amina's hand rested on her growing belly, and Rahim's gaze was soft, filled with admiration. "You've changed my life," he said quietly. "Not because you cooked for me, or helped me in small ways, but because you taught me what really matters. Grace. Patience. Love." Amina's eyes glistened. "And you've changed mine," she said. "You've shown me that even someone with everything can learn humility, and that people can care without asking for anything in return." They smiled at each other, a gentle understanding passing between them. In that moment, they did not need words to explain what had grown quietly over the past months. Trust, respect, and affection had blossomed like spring flowers, soft yet strong, delicate yet enduring. A few days later, a small celebration was held in the mansion for the upcoming arrival of Amina's child. Friends and family gathered, but the focus was simple: love, hope, and new beginnings. Rahim watched Amina, helping her serve food and ensuring she was comfortable. Every action of hers was filled with warmth, care, and grace, the same qualities that had quietly transformed his heart. As the evening drew to a close, Rahim took Amina's hand and led her to the quiet garden outside. The moonlight reflected softly on the flowers, creating a serene and gentle scene. "Amina," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You've taught me so much. You've shown me how to live, how to care, and how to love. I want to share my life with you, and our child. Will you allow me that honor?" Amina's eyes widened, a tear escaping down her cheek. She felt the depth of his sincerity, the warmth of his heart, and the quiet strength behind his words. After all they had shared, all the lessons they had taught each other, the answer was clear. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of certainty. "Yes, Rahim. I will." Rahim pulled her close, holding her gently. In that embrace, all the loneliness, struggles, and hardships they had faced seemed to melt away. In their shared trust and love, a new life, a new beginning, and a new family had quietly formed. Months later, when Amina gave birth to a healthy, happy child, Rahim was by her side. He held their baby carefully, marveling at the tiny hands, the soft hair, and the new life they had created together. He looked at Amina, seeing not just the woman who had cooked for him, but the woman who had taught him grace, patience, and love. "Thank you," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "For everything." Amina smiled softly, placing her hand over his. "No, Rahim. Thank you, for learning, for trusting, and for being here." In that quiet moment, surrounded by love, hope, and the gentle cries of their child, they both understood something profound. Life's greatest treasures were not wealth, power, or success, but trust, compassion, and the grace to care for one another. And so, in the warmth of their home, with a child to love and a life built on patience and understanding, Rahim and Amina began their new journey together. One not of luxury or grandeur, but of love, quiet strength, and the enduring beauty of simple, human grace. From that day forward, they faced life together, stronger, wiser, and kinder, proving that true transformation comes not from what you have, but from what you give, and from the grace you allow others to teach you.